Okay, hello everyone. I decided to do this small night broadcast, which I'm recording on a GoPro. I'm also recording on audio, and I have a phone above me, which I hope to use to record some publications that I've been looking at. And why I've decided to do this without really any planning is that this project that we are conducting, myself and Damien Flood, we've had two online assemblies at the start of April and then May, I think. And we've been kind of unpacking a lot of the things that have been said in those get togethers. Let's call them assemblies, not get togethers, because that has another association. But yeah, there are assemblies, and really we've had between 10 and 15 people in each assembly. And two times around we've had different people, and then some people that turned up for the first one. And we also put out a questionnaire where we had some questions around the conditions of contemporary painting. And there was lots in that, and it was kind of to do with painters in the world today, the performative aspect of their work, their relationship or interrelationship with social media, the digitization of painting, and how we consume painting now as a digital image, and we make opinions on it. We bring criticality to it. We make assumptions about it, even though it is not the painting itself. And so it's this whole environment that we're in. And myself and Damien are trying to grapple with that through this word called theory. And I think our notion of theory is different from the academic notion of theory, something that we have all confronted as artists in art school. And in one of the first broadcasts from here, the studio, I talked about this publication, a collection of essays on theory in America. And I brought up this theorist, Sylvain Lottringer, who died a few years ago, who brought semiotext to America, and he's also thought of someone who brought French, especially French avant-garde philosophy to New York. Deleuze, Guattari, Foucault, and then he was intermingling them with people like William Burroughs, American writers, and but American writers that were dealing with this kind of notion of the avant-garde, risk-taking. And he terms theory in a beautiful way. First of all, he makes a point to say that the artist is already dealing with theory through the making of the work. And they are probably ahead of the philosophers and the theorists in that sense. And the theorists are coming late to that, especially academic theorists. The same way that the poets sometimes are seen as coming before other artists. And so there's the way he defines theory is that it's something that you inhale line by line. And a phrase that I've used in the past, I only came across a piece I wrote 10 years ago, which I talk about how I want to look at theory without endnotes. And I repeated that recently in a piece I wrote around this subject, and I didn't realize I had written it 10 years ago. So there's something interesting in that. So, but what I'm finding anyway, and myself and Damien have been going back and forth, like with what we're trying to do here. Now we're coming from a different generation. We're coming, and we've repeated this over and over again, we come from an art education that was working through theory. Theory was everywhere, and it was also in publications that we read. It's in Sternberg Press, heralded by someone like Isabel Graw, and it was everywhere. It was in the seminars. There was also a crisis in criticism, where there was a feeling that artists, critics were not being self-reflexive enough in their work, especially in relation to the context in which they were making work. They were just making work and they weren't thinking about it, and there was no external voice to actually challenge them in some way. So myself and Damien are coming from this generation that in some ways have been haunted by theory. And that's why there's a pushback, I feel, even in the assemblies we've been having, and some exterior voices that have been writing pieces, theoretically, about the notion of theory. Definitely, I think, in response to this, that there is a pushback, and that, artists just need to make the stuff. They don't have to think about it. And I've nothing in the game here, because I'm not a painter. Even though I painted for probably 15 years, I stopped painting in this moment, 2006 to 2008, where theory was all around. There was a self-reflexivity around why you're making the work, critically, contextually, and I felt that painting wasn't doing the thing I needed to do at that time, even though I felt a real gravitational pull towards it all the time. I still haven't lost a love for painting, and how painters work within this space where they're dealing with the negativity around their market, how they are much closer to the market than other mediums, even photography in a way. Photographers are kind of more chameleon-like in that they can work within different spaces. But still, I was thinking about this recently, that new space in Dublin, the Centre for the Image, and Photo Ireland, and all these institutions that are very much fully focused on photography. It is a space in itself, very like painting, but it's not connected with the market as such. But still, it's hedged in to this space that gives it a kind of distinct identity. So painting, I'm thinking now, we're trying to think through this impossibility, really, to figure out what we want to do with this project, because we want to continue it on, and we want to find, even though we thank everyone that gave their reflections on being in the studio, their relationship with social media, their relationship to the market, and all those things that painters are dealing with. But we want to push it on, because I feel anyway, and I've only come to this insight when I was mowing the lawn outside. I'm still wearing my wellies here, which I can in this space. But I'm trying to think, like, what's the next way forward? And I think that at the moment we are trying to diagnose something. And with diagnosis comes negativity. You go to the doctor, something ails you, physically, mentally, you go to the doctor or the psychiatrist, and they give you a diagnosis. And that always, even though maybe in this contemporary culture there's a kind of relief around that, labeling it and then finding a way to combat it, there's always a negativity around diagnosis. And I feel that I was listening to this podcast around Jürgen Habermas, who I was really interested in art school actually, because he had this notion of the public sphere and this idealism around people coming together, especially in the 19th century, in coffee houses in Berlin or Paris. You got this also in the 1940s and 50s in Paris with avant-garde philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and lots of philosophers of that time coming together in coffee houses and thinking together. And so that idea of the public sphere, but also communicative action. So there's a kind of pragmatism, even though there's an idealism in Habermas, there's always a pragmatism in his philosophy, and especially his relationship with language. And I'm kind of interested in that. I'm interested in how we're having these online assemblies together. We're talking through things, but really it's difficult. It's, we were having this joke earlier on in this project that we need to have an ice melter or ice breaker, and because we felt everything is frozen in some ways. And after every assembly, we feel the ice is melting a little bit, but it's really the dynamic within Zoom, which is not, I feel, working the way it could work in person. So that's something we're going to probably propose, that we meet together somewhere. Maybe simulate what Jürgen Habermas is talking about, meeting in coffee houses. And find out what this project could be. What is on my mind is really one of the main motivations for this project was to make a zine, an art magazine, which I'm calling a zine, because of the DIY context in which I'm working here. And it's going to be screen printed, and it's going to be cheap and cheerful. And I have some examples of some publications from 2007, 2008 and onwards that were using newspaper. Now they're still beautiful publications, but and what I find always disheartening with Visual Artists Ireland, VAI's newsletter, is that it hasn't changed its packaging in a way. And I wonder if it's even been utilised now by artists. I know it's a kind of advertisement for the art scene as a whole, but it doesn't do anything beyond that. I really don't think the critique supplement within it ever did what it was rolled out in the beginning in terms of what it could do. I was on the panel when it first, I was in a panel in the lab with the late Jason Oakley, who was someone, an editor who adopted me earlier on in my writing activity, and a big influence actually on my writing in that context. And I was on this panel that kind of was dealing with like, could VAI roll out a critique supplement? And I said no on that panel. I don't know if it was recorded, I don't think it was, but I said certainly not. And that there was, the institution of VAI wouldn't be able to handle the pushback, if there was real criticism there. Not only that they could be sued, which definitely played out in the early days, not of Critique but of other publications connected with VAI. Could have been even the newsletter itself, I don't know, but there was cases brought against VAI in the beginning. So there was no way that was going to play out. Christine Leach, who was writing, I don't know whether for the Irish Independent or the Sunday Independent at that time, but she talked about how she was slapped in the face at an opening, because I definitely I was interested in her writing at that time because she was bringing criticism. There was a bite in it, where there wasn't bite in any other, Aidan Dunn. It was kind of passive overviews, descriptions of things, nice bits of writing, but there was no bite in it. And at that moment, there were writers, lots of writers writing on Circa as well, on the blog, that were playing around with this. And why I'm bringing up Critique, such a boring thing to bring up, it's like when I tried to describe screen printing. It's so boring talking about Critique, and theory, actually. But why I bring up this, because there was a thinking, there was a kind of pushing against the grain. There was... and that's what Critique, that's what theory is always doing. Forget about the endnotes, forget about the referencing. It's this idea of inhaling things and trying to see the world as it is now and why you're making the work you're making. And ask those questions. Stop going back into history. Stop romanticizing history. The nostalgia. Now that's another word that's come up in this, nostalgia. I think a better word, because nostalgia comes with negativity too, and I'm trying to combat negativity, and with another word, optimism. And I don't mean optimism, I mean criticism as optimism. Like, I've always felt that I was never... There's probably times I was performing mean-spiritedness at one point or another, writing over the last 20 years. But really there was an optimism in how I write. There still is today. And I brought up this word in the most recent review I did of Matt Bollinger's show at Mothers Tank Station Dublin. It's a long form piece, it's around 3,000 words, and it just came out. But I arrived at this insight that his paintings, even though there's a kind of negativity that you can presume or assume or associate with these people, individuals, standing crestfallen or on pause in suburban middle America, or on the bleachers after the parade has ended and the sun is going down. Or in the small night hours, I keep on saying small night hours, but in the small hours of the night for a mother who's filling a cup with milk for her baby that won't go to sleep. All this stuff, there's a kind of negativity there. But I saw, just in the production, that these paintings exist, that there's an energy behind them. There's a kind of sense that Bollinger isn't working from a depressive position. Maybe he's gaining energy from a depressive position, but there's energy there all the same. And I've been thinking about criticism and theory as being optimistic. That it's pulling us out, it's making us see true language, true reflection, true reflexivity. Isabel Graw uses this word, market, or for Merlin Carpenter. So Merlin Carpenter is part of the kind of Sternberg press, Texter Kunst group of critics, theorists, and artists, very close to Isabel Gra. And I have basically all his publications. I have two here that I may show or may not. One in particular, which is called Mid-Career Paintings. And it's from 2016, 10 years ago. But still very, has loads of vitality in it. Just the ideas behind it, the motivations, the staging, etc. Isabel Gra calls Merlin Carpenter market reflexive. So, and the word reflexive is really important. I was talking about this to a student who wanted feedback on a communications module for Gorey Art School, which I teach, and I was talking about, how in an art college or in university, you're given higher points for reflexivity, like insight on why you're doing the things, why you're thinking this way, from a kind of subjective point of view, but also external point of view, like you're looking outward. So there's a kind of reflexivity based in your practice, whether you're writing an essay on literature or you're making a painting, I think we've lost that a little bit because there's no real grounding anymore. We have this virtual space that is fluid and rolling, and it's a simulacrum of the real world, but it's a different world, and there's different value systems there. And then you have the real world, which seems desolate and dead in a particular in a fashion. So, this idea of reflexivity is important, and also criticality. And criticality is a word that's just it's having that reflexivity, but also questioning it, asking questions like why. And definitely in Merlin Carpenter's work, there's a reflexivity, but there's an optimism there. There's a kind of, I wouldn't call it smirking optimism, but there's something knowing. It's interesting in the two essays in the book, which I read this morning, and the essays are really interesting because one essay, I don't know if it's by a curator or a fellow artist, but they talk about the experience of seeing this body of work in the Kunstsaal. I think it's a basement space. There's 22 paintings, which are not paintings, and I'll get to that. And then there's another writer that he commissioned to write after the fact of the exhibition. And this writer didn't get to see the work at all. So he's basing his analysis and descriptions and critique on really good install photos. And he says something like really good or whatever, but it's kind of, there's a kind of negativity there, even saying really good. Like they had to be really high quality, and because they're high quality, he can enter the work. It really says it where we are now. This idea of having high quality photography that puts the work in a context, in an architecture, that's good enough. That we can experience art through that lens now. I'm going to show you the book, and I'm going to sorry, I didn't press play. So let me just see if I have that there. I have this other book here where the GoPro is sitting on, but I'm not going to move it because then the GoPro will move. Okay, I haven't planned this out, obviously. This is the book I was talking about. So it's Merlin Carpenter, Mid-Career Paintings. It's by Sternberg Press, of course, and it has this series. This is Merlin Carpenter with the long blonde hair. I think he's from the UK originally, but definitely associate. I think he probably lives in Berlin or somewhere. And here's just maps. Here's the install shots, maybe that the writer's talking about, the detail, but they're in black and white. Okay, and here's the floor plan of the Kunstsaal. like outside the building. Here's a banner, mid-career paintings. They're kind of midlife crisis paintings in a way as well. This is interesting here, this mirror image. I don't know what actually the image has on the front. Oh yeah, there's a motorbike. I think there's a Smeg fridge. There's a synthesizer of some sort. And there's a pram. 22 paintings. Now, the thing about this is that they are, they're not paintings as such. They're transit blankets stretched. So you know those cheap transit blankets that basically they're grey, they feel woolen, very I'm thinking about someone there, but I can't get the name. But they have those little specks of colour in them because they look recycled. So they're transit blankets stretched. Probably the van that took the paintings. So you have all this. It's a beautiful book. I love the black and white documentation because it's not trying to simulate with accuracy, and why would it? But it's giving a fantasy once again, and it really brings theory forward. I think that it's diagnosing, but also in practice it's illustrating. I think this is the thing we're missing in this, the practice. I'm also interested in the American pragmatists who put theory into practice. People like Richard Rorty, who's a neo-pragmatist, but there's something about his pragmatism, bringing theory into the world and changing things, that I think myself and Damien are interested in, or even the possibility of questioning the status quo now. So what is interesting about Merlin Carpenter, and these paintings, I think they were exhibited in 2015 at the Kunsthalle, but they were dated 2016. Also, they weren't for sale, and I think they were named or grouped into the seven commercial galleries that Merlin Carpenter is represented by. And I don't know if they were grouped like a few paintings per gallery or whatever, but there's a real, even though there's a kind of cynicism there, there's an optimism or a playfulness, there's a humor. These are the paintings here. Now you're probably not going to be able to see them in this. Has the label here, and here's the painting. Let's call it a painting, but it's a transit blanket. On stretcher frame, 254 by 198 centimeters. I don't know if you can see them. I can't see how this has been visualized on the phone, and there's the label. Sorry if I didn't get that. But anyway, he's one artist I'm really interested in terms of kind of this idea of optimism. This is probably his most famous exhibition, the opening at Rena Spaulding Fine Art New York, and that's when he did this performance on the opening night where he wrote onto
bare white canvases. Let me just get some of the phrasing. So once again, he's documenting in a similar fashion to mid-career paintings. You have this Mercedes. This toured. It wasn't only in New York, so it was in Europe as well. Relax, it's only a crap Rena Spalding show. So this I think is the point I'm making. This idea of reflexivity. He did also paintings around the curate die collector Scum, splashes. I drive a Prius. So that was the hybrid of the time, hybrid car. Skinny jeans. So yeah, this is the reflexivity I suppose I'm thinking about with respect to our project, and also this idea of optimism. So we're going to make things. Damien is having a show. I'm just going to stop this. Oh, I won't stop it yet. Damien's going to have a show. My purpose is really to inhabit whether Green and Red Gallery with Damien or in the basement or wherever. And the date of that could be shifted a bit. We don't know yet. It's in flux, but it's going to happen. And I'm going to produce a magazine based around painting. And I wanted to confront some of the things that I've been talking about here. But I also want, and we want, other painters to contribute to this. Sorry, I got cut off there for a second. So, yeah, I want to make a zine, a publication that is ambitious, that it confronts the conditions of contemporary painting that we can't really hold on to or grasp, because it always is slipping through our fingers, literally, as we grapple with it on our phones, not just as consumers of other painters, as digital images, but also of our own paintings. How we take a shot of our painting before we leave the studio, and we digest it through that medium, and how that is changing things. And I kind of want to be reflexive on that with respect to how this publication, the screen printed publication, which is also dealing with a kind of simulation of painting. So taking a digital image of a painting, and then one step further, making it into a screen printed image on a piece of paper, and then placing that in with a collection of other screen printed images, whether monochrome or CYMK, which is more photographic again. So it's dealing with all these manifestations. I sent what I've been doing recently I've been working with artists, screen printing images of their work and ideas, and I've been posting the results or drafts of the results to them directly, and they're always surprised by what their work becomes. They're holding it, it's not in the phone, so it's a different object. But with the screen printed quality, especially, I use screens that have a high mesh count, so there's a lot of detail in them. There's texture as well. So they're dealing with this new object that isn't a digital image, but it comes from a digital image, and it's also compressing it down into this new thing. And seeing it like that, I think it must be a feeling of the uncanny, because it's familiar but it's very different. And then you have to tolerate that or compromise because I really do feel that artists can't see their own work. I write about that also again in the piece I've written on Matt Bollinger, and David Godbol's use, the co-director at Mother's Tank Station, his use of AI in the press release, where in a kind of interview format he interviews AI on the work of Matt Bollinger, and it brings up this kind of question about theory, other voices, but also how we situate our work in the world. And weirdly, that makes, by situating Matt Bollinger's work, which comes from Middle America, Missouri, and it's reflecting reflexively on a place he grew up. I don't know if he still lives there. I think he lives in New York maybe now, I don't know. And there's nostalgia there, of course, but there's also a kind of positivism in the bulk of his paintings, the bulk of his figures, the light, the endeavour to make this work, which takes a lot of labour. It takes a lot of baggage that perhaps a lot of people disavow. And I want to end here with that. I know I was going to show you, I might show you two more publications, but this idea of reflexivity and disavowal. Reflexivity I've talked about, Marilyn Carpenter being someone who practices in reflexivity around the market and around his use of painting as both a criticism of the market, but also as something to survive through, that he uses painting as a foil, a critical foil, but also a reflexive foil, that brings a lot of seduction and desire around, because he's dealing, of course, with collector scum. But then there's this word disavowal, and I think most artists work in disavowal, and I feel it's the opposite of reflexivity. Disavowal is a psychoanalytic term, and it's the best way of describing it is that it's an acknowledgement of something in the world, but then it's a turning away from that acknowledgement and continuing on as if it doesn't have any effect on your life. And sometimes that disavowal in psychoanalysis can become fetishistic. So you acknowledge something, it could be bad, it could be banal, you turn away, and then you substitute that acknowledgement with something else. So if it's something bad, it's way easier to illustrate it as something bad. Someone dies. Like Slavoj Žižek has this whole story around the death of his friend experienced the death of his wife, and he seemed to get on okay with it, with this death. But then when it came around, the best way I can discuss this is, or describe this is, just let's say Zizek went over to his house and he seemed fine, but then when he went inside he realized his friend had a hamster, but he showed he wasn't leaving the house because he had to care for this hamster. And Zizek diagnoses this love of the hamster, especially when the hamster dies and when his friend falls into a deep depression, that his love for his wife, which died with her, was transmitted back into the hamster. a hamster of all things. The scale of it's not a big dog or something like that. It doesn't have the scale of the human, but the love he has for this hamster is basically the same love he had for his wife. But so that's fetishistic disavowal. And I'm wondering today, in artists' disavowal of the conditions in which they make work. And of course the basic income for the arts brought up that again. I think that smashed through that disavowal, and artists became very aware of the conditions in which they are working and surviving. And it brought about, I think, a lot of negativity. So I'm just going to show you two magazines I'm looking at, and they're from 2013, which is Mouse. I don't know if I press play on this again. Sorry. So I'll just put on record on this. So the first one is Mouse, which is 2013. And I talked about this before, I think. I press play on that? I'm not sure. So Mouse has this glossy cover. I'm going to push back this a little bit, tilt it up. So hopefully you can see this. Mouse has this glossy cover, but then it has newspaper. Maurizio Catalan, Banana Boy, and the inside cover, and then we have Mouse, and we have advertisements for galleries, etc. Lots of them. This is the Art World bubble. Yeah, and then it has some articles, but a lot of advertisements, okay? Which is interesting. I want to tackle that as well, maybe in the magazine, to not negate it. Not say, oh, this doesn't have any advertisements. Maybe it does. And maybe to play around with that idea. So some great articles in here. I've read a few. Interviews with artists. Art writing, orphaning, migration of the humanities and no information. So this is Chris Kraus. So yeah, lots of more interviews, etc. So, but what I like about this is this gloss and this newspaper, and there's something about that's attractive. The second one is a really strange creamier. And only recently I was talking to an artist, and this new publication has come out called Crackerjack. I think maybe by two curators or collectors, but it's very much a market-driven publication. You can get it free online, Crackerjack, as a PDF. It's the first issue. But it has very big fashion labels, etc., in the folds of it. There's an interview in the first issue with Hans Ulrich Obrist, of course. I think he could be in this as well. And this is from 2000, I think maybe 8, but I'm not sure. But once again, it's newspapers by Faden, Creamier, Contemporary Art and Culture. 10 curators, 10 sources, 100 contemporary artists, curator. It's a beautiful thing. Nina Canal is in it as one of the artists. This is Andrea Fraser. But I really like this publication. It has beautiful space in the margins. So here's your 100 contemporary artists. They're not Jared Byrne, Tom Burr. So fascinating, but there's it's beautifully printed. And what I would say the difference between this and Mouse is this on newspaper, and it's a kind of a glossier newspaper. It's just beautiful. But look at that, so. It's just creamier. It has cream paper. It's very reflexive, but the quality this is really for collectors. Creamier, just the name in itself. But that other publication I was talking about, Crackerjack, it's definitely for collectors. You can't buy it. I'd say the print edition will be sent to gallerists, important gallerists like Gagosian and David Werner and whomever in Europe. But I think it had its opening launch at Venice. Walid Beshti. I saw his work in Venice actually. So listen, that's where we're at. I think this is beautiful though. So, was funny, undeniably, the art world is experiencing the onset of change due to the economic climate. So this was at the moment, you have a Richard Prince, doesn't say that's definitely a Richard Prince car, with a model draped over it. Frieze Art Fair 2007, London. So I want to definitely in this publication look at the art world and the art scene reflexively, and to critique that maybe through other voices. So we really want to invite especially painters into this, because I'm definitely going to do something on photography and other maybe mediums. But this time all my focus now is on painting. And painting is an interesting space in relation to its relationship with digital image. So, and its market reflexivity, which is a market disavowal for most painters. Or if they don't have a market, it's just disavowal of the world, I would say. And that would be my main criticism around painting, that it has become hermeticized, not just in the subjectivities of the artist, but in the past. And I want to see painters not prescribing anything, but I just want to see something reflexive in painting. Forget about representation and abstraction. It means nothing. I think what would be great, even if those things were, it's very hard to articulate this, but just say an artist like Marilyn Carpenter, he's talking through other voices all the time. He's also manifesting this reflexivity in his actions. He's making paintings, he's selling paintings, but he's also doing these performative actions, communicative actions that inject his work in a criticality and a reflexivity that is uncommon. And I think it's really interesting that he got in that writer who had never seen the show, who was working off installed shots and other information to write the essay. And that's 2015, which is really before this moment, these last 10 years maybe even, where painting and art has become commodified and digitized and altered within the phone, within the laptop, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that recorded and you stuck with it. Thank you, and I will be back again sometime.